Get my 6.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a beautiful October afternoon here. October Nights by the time you're hearing the story. From October Nights, part 2, 31 more tales for the Halloween season. So I'm going to announce our most recent winner here. I have my tripod set up from where I made that video in my office last night. There we go. Today's winner, okay, for everybody who's entered the contest, and this is what's up for grabs today. They didn't specify which Halloween decoration they wanted, so I'm giving them the other. Get my 6. No, get my 6. No, get my 6. Halloween totem pole that I carved myself with my carving knives out of a piece of basswood. This is going to Patricia Saletto out of the great state of New Jersey. So Patricia, this will be arriving to you in the mail probably by the end of the week because we're sending it out tomorrow. Patricia submitted a couple stories actually to our email address here, crazylake@mail.com. This is how you win. Thank you to everybody who has submitted a story. You're still in the pool. We're pulling out a name, going to have a winner every night between now and the Day of the Dead, November 1. And if the stories keep coming, people keep entering the contest, we're going to keep giving stuff away. Christmas is coming up. You know how it goes. The day after Halloween, you just start hearing Christmas carols everywhere. Nobody even remembers Thanksgiving anymore. But I'm going to be back in the wood shop making Christmas decorations, and we'll keep this going. Simply email your story of your true, real experience with anything related to the paranormal, supernatural, cryptids, UFOs, aliens, abductions, anything like that. Or maybe something that happened to a family member of yours, and give us permission, of course, to use it either here on the channel or in the next volume or an upcoming volume of True Hauntings. Volume 2 is going to be out at some time in November, and all these stories are going in there, so you'll get to read them. If you don't hear them here, we're going to be telling several of them here. And your name will be entered, and you can go to our Etsy store. The link is in the description box below. Any of the Halloween decorations you see in there that I've made, they're all handmade by me. You say, hey, I want that. If it costs $50, who cares? You submit your story, we pick your name. That's what you want. Tell us in the email. I want that, and that's what we're going to send you. We're paying for the shipping and everything, okay? So, with no further ado, as my beautiful bride Dearly, a.k.a. Giggly Girl, would say, it's time to get on to the story. Now, listen, this is a tongue twister. You remember the story from about a week ago called Stick-a-Hick? I said you needed to know what the word facetious meant. Listen, you need to know what the word facetious means with this one as well, okay? And you remember in the prologue of the entire book here, September 30, where old Jim Brown comes back and talks to the October storyteller and says, we picked you because you're not political like Stephen King, who ostracized half his clients, half his reader base after the 2016 election. Hey, I'm an equal opportunity offender. So if you were offended by the story Stick-a-Hick, okay, because you're a social justice warrior and you felt you were erroneously portrayed in that story, this is where you get your revenge, okay? And for those of you rural white males like myself who maybe were laughing your ass off while you're listening to Stick-a-Hick, you might not be laughing so much when you listen to this one. But listen, it's all about facetiousness, making fun of things you probably shouldn't make fun of. All right, so here's the title. An afternoon at the West by God, Kentucky, Arkansas, Bama, Georgia County Fair. Yes. Let me say it again slowly. An afternoon at the West by God, Kentucky, Arkansas, Bama, Georgia County Fair. That's pretty much every southern state I could get together in one word. See that? And this is the second of 2 stories in this work dedicated to the everlasting memory of George Carlin, who, in this writer's humble opinion, was more than a comedian and a counterculture icon. He was a prophet. Somebody mentioned that he was not a prophet because he was an atheist. I'm not talking about a religious prophet. I'm talking about someone who was telling us, pretty much warning us of things to come. And basically, to sum it up, George Carlin could have said, had the movie been made by then, maybe it was before his death, Idiocracy. You know that movie Idiocracy? Go watch it. We're there. George Carlin just prophesized it's coming, but here we are. Now, with no further ado, Preface, okay? Back in October of 2020, and if you read part one, you'll remember a story called, I can't remember the story, but I'm referencing the story from part one. That's really the only sequel-ish type thing there is in this one. Back in October of 2020, a former alt-right blogger named Damien Little led an anti-COVID mask protest in the town of Charlottesville, Virginia. Damien had started out small with a crowd of only 9 in Richmond 5 months prior, and the powers that be considered Little a joke at the time of his small rally in Richmond, if it could even be called a rally with its meager turnout, due to Little having spent the previous half a dozen years or so of his pathetic life in his mother's basement, playing various video games and watching multiple genres of porn. However, with the help of social media and in time, Little had garnered enough of an online following to generate enough Google AdSense revenues to move out of his mother's basement, and, seeing nothing but dollar signs, he pursued his rapid growth of social media influence, and when he held his rally in Charlottesville, the protest anything and everything capital of the South, several thousand people showed up. Once again, the powers that be misunderestimated the power of social media, as all the cool kids would like to say, like literally. Some dude in a wheelchair named Frank, who had contracted the virus due to his neighbor's lack of consideration and refusal to wear a COVID mask, had tried to run Damien Little down in the streets of Charlottesville during the protest behind the wheel of his souped-up handicapped van, but he'd failed in his attempt, having been smashed by the 315 Amtrak, as both it and the dude named Frank's souped-up handicapped van crossed the tracks at the same time. Frank was killed, and Damien Little lived to see another protest. The next one, even larger, held at UC Berkeley on the West Coast, the protest anything and everything capital of the world. The powers that be would eventually disappear young Damien Little. In proper powers that be fashion, they attempted to discredit Little by making his death look like a freak masturbation accident. He'd been found hanging from his belt in the basement of the house he'd purchased with his Google AdSense checks, with his pants down and with multiple browsers opened on his personal computer, displaying every form of pornography except traditional heterosexual/missionary-style intercourse porn between two white people who claimed to be married, of course, in an attempt to get his most loyal followers, his fellow alt-righters, to abandon his former preachings and finally come to realize that the COVID vaccine was very real and not the mark of the beast, as real as the virus itself, which some were finally coming around to believing, and that they needed to get vaccinated and start wearing masks to slow the spread of the virus. However, this plan by the powers that be backfired. Damien Little was martyred. The refusal to believe that COVID and science in general, for that matter, was real among lower socioeconomic rural whites increased. And despite reaching the point to where unvaccinated lower socioeconomic whites led the COVID death rates by more than 1,000% over any other demographic group, those who made up this group became even more unwilling to follow any guidance in regard to the pandemic, which they all referred to as the plandemic. They continued to believe it was all a farce, all by design, orchestrated to remove their demigod, the mighty Orange One, from office, and to take even more control of the masses of humanity, which they collectively referred to as the sheeple. Oh yes, and we must not forget, it was also all part of their plot, they believed, to come and take their guns. Hence, a reconvening of the powers that be to construct Plan B, which would be named Operation Frank, in honor of the previously mentioned dude in a wheelchair. Guys, I just have to sidebar and say George Carlin is giving me his stamp of approval from nowhere right now. I hereby call this council of the powers that be to order, Rocky said. He was the guy in charge of the powers that be. His real name wasn't Rocky, and he wasn't nicknamed after the boxer. He may or may not have been nicknamed after a certain feller whose name this writer will not put in type out of fear of being disappeared by Rocky and his henchmen. Rocky, one of several powers that be underlings, unworthy of a nickname. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Rocky, that's dialogue. One of several powers that be, one of the several powers that be underlings unworthy of a nickname began. We think we've come up with a plan B. Stop wasting my time, underling unworthy of a nickname, Rocky said. Let's hear it. Okay, the underling said. Let's kill off all the lower socioeconomic whites, and then we just won't have to worry about this nonsense anymore. Are you suggesting genocide? Rocky said. No, sir, the underling said. There would be plenty of white people left, just the educated professional kind. Rocky said, sounding as if he were considering this, but he was really only considering what he would like to have for lunch later in the day. And what would be the advantage to this, he asked, having narrowed his choices down to roast beef with a side of mashed potatoes and gravy or an Italian sub. Okay, so you know how it's said that we humans only use like 3% of our brains, the underling said? Yes, Rocky said, deciding in his mind on the sub. Well, the underling said, if we eliminated the lower socioeconomic whites, thereby removing them from the gene pool, our scientists estimate that in a few short generations we may be able to use as much as 3 add about 15 zeros and then a 1% of our minds. Would such a small gain in the evolution of humanity be worth the effort? Rocky asked. Yes, the underling said. How so? Rocky asked. Sir, the underling said. We'd get rid of all the fucking rednecks. Rocky said, sounding as if he were considering this. The idea of a world without rednecks. But he was really trying to figure out if he wanted mayonnaise on his sub or merely Italian dressing. And how would we do this, he asked. How would we rid the world of these lower socioeconomic whites? Rednecks, as you refer to them. Well, the underling said, we outsource the problem to that crazy lake guy. Heard of him? And his plan sounds, well, it's one of those plans that's just crazy enough to work. Crazy Lake? Rocky said. Isn't he the guy who we used as a guinea pig in MK Ultra, who actually beat the odds and survived, and actually went on to become successful in society even though he was supposed to have committed suicide? Yes, sir, the underling said. But he actually became successful by dropping out of society and then poking fun at it through social media and the use of the written word. Is this the same crazy lake we tasked to collect the Bigfoot Sasquatch feces samples in order for our scientists to come up with the COVID vaccine in the first place? That's from Bigfoot Sasquatch Files Volume 9, I think. I can't remember. The very one, the underling said. But that story took place in his Bigfoot Sasquatch series, not this one. These stories pertain to Halloween, or at least the fall of the year, if you will, like this one. And what is his plan? Rocky asked, ignoring all the boring author bio and book series crap. Well, sir, the underling said, he's in the hall waiting to explain it to you, but we've got to tell you there's been a breach of sorts, so you'll need to be prepared to understand that he's privy to some information he wasn't supposed to be privy to. He hasn't abused it, though. He's used it to create his plan. And what information would that be? Rocky asked, now trying to determine if he'd send his page to Subway or Jersey Mike's. It's about the island, the underling said. It seems he's still in contact with Pete Richards. You mean the other MK Ultra survivor? Rocky said, who's still down and out in the Philippines and who edits really shitty self-published books under the pen name of Truman Jackson? Yes, the underling said. That would be the one, sir. You see, Richards told Lake about how the islanders on that very strange island, you know, the Isle of Capri, as it's come to be known because of Lake's novel, Isle of Capri, which is available in print or Kindle version on Amazon or from Etsy with an autograph from Lake's Etsy store, the link of which is in the description box of all his YouTube channel videos from Homesteading Off the Grid. Those people on that island, they're completely immune to the virus in that they can carry the virus and pass it on, infecting others by way of body fluid transmission while never showing any signs of having the virus themselves, nor ever being negatively affected as carriers. Stop wasting my time with further explanation, Rocky said. Sorry, sir, I beg pardon. Yes, you are sorry, and you do beg, you peasant, but alas, I'll pardon you. If you stop wasting my time and send the crazy one in so we can hear him out. And send my page, Henrik, to Jersey Mike's for an Italian sub, no mayonnaise. Yes, sir, the underling said, and then he stepped out into the hallway and sent the page on his way to the sub shop, and he had Crazy Lake come in and explain his idea for Plan B. The council heard the crazy one out, and when he was finished, they sat in silence for a full 30 seconds, not considering whether the plan would work or not, but trying to figure out if the crazy one was indeed mad or if he was an absolute genius. None in attendance could figure it out, but all agreed that the plan was crazy enough to work, so they approved the plan, and then they all broke into hysterics. The following are the events which took place less than 1 month later, where this Plan B, known as Operation Frank, again named after the dude in the wheelchair, so that he could be martyred, was carried out at the West by God, Quintana, Caro, Arkansas, Bama, Georgia County Fair. Step right up, step right up. Guess this lovely lady's waiting. If you're within a pound, you'll win a prize, the caller yelled. It was a beautiful fall day in the month of October, and even the old-timers were saying they couldn't remember when there'd been better weather at the West by God, Quintana, Arkansas, Bama, Georgia County Fair. I'll take a guess, one Riley C. Edwards said, stepping up and laying his money down. Why, she's a petite little thing, Edwards said, staring at the buxom blonde standing on his caller's right. I bet she don't go over 250, he said. I'm putting my money on 250. Close enough for government work, the caller said. Take your prize. Edwards picked a red, white, and blue pinwheel to stick in his tomato garden back home. It sure had been nice of the caller to let him pick a prize since he'd been as much as 30 pounds off, as little Miss Petite thing went a full 280. Last chance to submit your pie for the competition, another caller yelled from a few tables away. Last chance to submit your pie for the competition, he said again. I'll submit my pie if you'll allow me to enter, a strange voice came from within the crowd. Everyone standing around the pie table, their mouths watering since it had been at least half an hour since any of them had eaten last, turned to face in the direction of the strange-sounding voice. And when they did, they saw an individual that seemed quite out of place here at the West by God, Quintana, Arkansas, Bama, Georgia County Fair. A 5 feet nothing, 100 and nothing pound island beauty with dark brown skin and waist-long jet black hair and big black almond eyes, and she was holding up a mango pie. Oh, the crowd gasped in unison, and they all jumped back at least 5 feet in order to distance themselves from this out-of-place intruder. Well, okay, 5 inches, but in all relativity, it was a big leap for them because it was so much harder for them to overcome inertia. It's why they didn't like to do it often. Don't worry, ye all, she said, trying her best to say y'all in a southern accent and failing miserably. I ain't gonna bite ya. Do you mean bite? One of the locals in attendance said. That's what I say, the little brown beauty holding the pie said. Bit. I'll help you with your enunciations, ma'am, a young man of about 20 said, beginning to walk over to the petite, like literally, beauty holding the pie, just before having his arm grabbed by his mama. Don't you dare talk to that thing, his mama said. Why not, mama? The young man said. She sure is purty. Look at her, his mother said. She ain't like us. Kisses for pesos, a lovely female voice came from across the way. The crowd turned, and about 50 yards away, they saw a whole slew of fair booths that had not been there only moments before. Kisses for pesos, came the voice again. The crowd looked and saw now another beautiful Pacific Island princess, no more than 20 years old, offering exotic kisses for what should have been $1, but she was still struggling with the currency conversion. I'll give you $1 for a kiss, you little cutie, Jethro Davis said. He'd forgotten that his wife, since 2 weeks after high school graduation, Judith, was standing right beside him. You touch that whatever she is in any way, and you ain't a-coming back home to me, you asshole, Judith said to Jethro. Forget him, a man's voice with an exotic accent came from behind. Judith turned around and saw an island man, tanned and tawny, standing behind her. "I'm supposed to charge for kisses too," this islander said, "but you're so pretty, I'll give you one for free." Judith, eyes wide, forgot all about Jethro and made her way over to the island man. "If you think I'm pretty now," she said, "you should have seen me when I was young. Why, I was prom queen senior year." "How old are you?" the islander asked. "I'll be 32 next spring." I hate to tell you this, pretty lady, but 32 is still young." The islander would have guessed her to be pushing 50, as would have most anyone else outside of Appalachistan. "It ain't the years," Judith said, "it's the miles. You'll understand when you get to be my age, young man." "Ma'am," the islander said, "I'm already older than you." "Why, you slick-talking joker, you," Judith said. "I bet you sweet-talk all the pretty girls that way." And then she puckered up, and the island man made a mental note to either extract more money from that damned Pete Richards, who'd set this whole thing up through Crazy Lake, as directed by the powers that be, or beat the holy hell out of him for the great sacrifice he was about to make in the name of science and evolution. One of the two, once he returned to the Isle of Capri. Again, book available with an autograph from Etsy. The link's in the description box below. Jethro saw that his wife was now kissing the islander behind him. He cared not. He turned and looked deep into the jet black eyes of the beautiful young island lady in front of him, and he leaned in, and just before kissing her, he said, "I've always had a thing for colored women. I just couldn't ever act on it, 'cause, well, Daddy would just roll over in his grave, just like his daddy and his daddy before him, and well, I just couldn't let him know, and..." "Shut up and kiss me," the little brown beauty said, and Jethro did kiss her, and Jethro did like it, and after the kiss was done, Jethro did pull out his wallet, and he did dig out more dollars, and he did kiss this young Pacific Island princess over and over and over, and 9,000 miles away, lying in cement caskets and above-ground graves, as the islanders' burial traditions were based on those of Spain, who had occupied them for centuries, and who had brought that part of the culture with them, the little brown beauty's ancestors were rolling over in their graves. "And by the way," the little brown beauty said to Jethro when he was finally out of money, hence the kisses finally ended, "it's not colored woman. It is woman of colored. Next!" Jethro walked off in a complete daze. It took a full 15 minutes before he even remembered he had a wife. He went back to where he'd last seen her, the spot where she'd been talking to the man from the islands, but both of them were gone. Jethro stood for a moment listening to what sounded like a pig squealing from behind a curtain, covering a small stage or something behind where his wife and the island man had been. In between what he thought to be pig squeals, he heard a man saying, "You are so pretty, you are so pretty." And it sounded as if he were saying it while holding his nose. Well, Jethro thought, they must be having some kind of pig pageant or something back there. Then he walked off, hoping to find his wife elsewhere, and hoping he wouldn't have too much hell to pay after having spent their last dollar kissing the little brown beauty. And the afternoon went on just thus. Women got angry at their men who were more than willing to pay $1, because none of them knew what the conversion to the islanders' pesos was, to kiss the most beautiful little brown women in existence, only to forget their anger when solicited for their dollars for the kiss or more of an equally attractive island man. The little brown beauty who'd entered her mango pie in the contest won, and since her pie, but mostly she, had been so popular among the crowd of locals, they were all happy as their pigs in mud and shit back home when she let them know that she had an entire van full of her mango pies, so everyone could have a slice. She simply made no mention that the van, a black one with no windows, unlike so many of their white ones with no windows, belonged to the powers that be, and that every single pie in the van, like the one she'd entered in the contest, had been fully spat and sneezed on by her and her fellow virus-infected yet symptom-free for life islanders, and that all who ate the pie, just like all who were paying for wet, sloppy kisses and more, were being infected with the very virus that they claimed did not exist. And since none of them were vaccinated, because there had been no way in hell any of them were going to accept the mark of the beast, and especially since they were all disgustingly obese, out of shape, and had many, many, many underlying health conditions, far too many to count, as a result of the lack of care they took of their bodies. Their days had just become numbered. Oh, what a lovely time was had by one and all that afternoon at the West by God, Kentenna, Arkansas, Bama, Georgia County Fair. But alas, this was not the only county fair where such events were taking place. They were occurring throughout the South and deep in the heart of Appalachistan, and in time the powers that be would be pleased that their Plan B, dubbed Operation Frank, again named after the dude in the wheelchair who tried to head all of this mess off at the pass in taking out Damien Little, but who'd failed all because of that damn 315 Amtrak back in Charlottesville back in 2020, did work this time. The number of deaths among lower socioeconomic whites after these events and at the hands of that which they did not believe to exist jumped 10,000-fold, and alas, in less than a year, society would be able to ditch the masks for the most part, except when they were needed again during times of evolved virus strains, during which times a majority of what the recently deceased masses would refer to as the sheeple complied. Hence, those periods of time were greatly limited in scope. Oh, small pockets of lower socioeconomic whites would remain, but not everyone went to their local county fairs, or because not everyone went to their local county fairs, but they too in time would be thinned out to a controllable population with future Supreme Court law passages such as the outlawing of hunting of any type by any means, this to cut off the primary food source to lower socioeconomic whites, that food source of course being wild game. And with such future social media challenges, such as a game called Stick-a-Hick. But we've already heard that story, haven't we? The end. So there you have it. I have now equally offended both sides with facetious fiction. Make sure to join us tomorrow for a really good story called The Day the Music Died. And again, congratulations to Patricia Soletto in the great state of New Jersey, named after a rock album. Yes, Bon Jovi wrote a bunch of songs they put on an album titled New Jersey back in the 80s, and the album was so great it made them the greatest rock band ever. That's the greatest rock band album ever, and everything was so great about the band and the album they actually named an entire state after it, New Jersey. If you would like to be entered into the drawing to win any of the custom handmade Halloween decorations that this guy, one Crazy Lake, made in the wood shop over there, send your true story of anything associated with the paranormal to the channel here at crazylake@mail.com. Again, the email address is crazylake@mail.com. If you're pissed off because of that story, stop taking yourself too seriously. No one else does anyway, brah. And we'll see you for more next time.